I'm going to close all of these screens. So we only see one. Are you all able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So we have a few rules of engagement. One, make sure you have paper and pencil. Ask questions. Stop me, ask questions. We're going to talk about some things. The second is 100% engagement. You want to make sure that you are participating in some of our activities. And then the third is to take notes. All right, so we are going to first go through some of the content. I'm going to ask for you all to recap some of the content, and then we are actually going to do some practice questions together. All right, so we're going to start with foundational skills. So on the Praxis reading examination, you are going to be talking about phonological awareness. So does anybody already know about phonological awareness? How do you all define that in your words? And you can unmute.
Yeah, phonological awareness is understanding that each letter has a sound, each sound makes a word, and each word makes, a sentence.
Very good, very good. So I think about phonological awareness in terms of elements. So when you learned in science about the periodic table and you thought about elements is the smallest possible thing that you can break it down to. And when you put those different elements together, they make words and they create new words, they create rhymes. So that is a lot of what the reading test discusses, the elementary reading test discusses. So a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound. And I see, Christina, you have unmuted. Are you here for reading or early childhood?
For reading, I'm sorry.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you so much for muting for me. So we have the phoneme that is the smallest unit of sound. So that's what I talk about with the elements. And there are 44 different phonemes. Then you also have diphthongs. So that's a fun word. That just means diphthongs work together to produce one sound. So for instance, sh, sh, that sound is a sound that goes together. So there's some different things that you can do when you're teaching a child to help them manipulate words and see how those sounds work together. So substitution is one. Substitution is the replacement of phonemes to make new words. So let's say that you turn sat into bet. So you change that first letter to change the sound and the word. Then we have segmentation. That's the separation of sounds. So you break down how to sound it out. So mat. Then you have deletion. Deletion is a phoneme removal. So it's taking away one of those letters to make a new word. So you take mat and you change it to at, okay? So I hope this is a pretty easy foundational review for you all. We also have this general overview here. What I'm going over right now is referring to the language, reading, and communication. And then we talk a lot about reading. So you see that it's pretty even with 32 questions being focused on reading and 33 being focused on language, writing, and communication. So now let's talk a little bit about phonics instruction. So this will be a progression from simple to complex. So when we talk about the vowel sounds, you would usually teach short vowels before long. You would teach letters that are similar in appearance, like B and D. And then you'll go to more complex, like letters that are similar in sound, M and N. And then letters that have multiple sounds. They're a little bit more complicated. Then we have sight words, and sight words are words that are repeated often so that students learn it by sight. You might see lists as a teacher of 100 sight words or 50 sight words. I've even seen some with 500 sight words, but these are words that students essentially memorize. They understand how to say those words and it helps them with fluency. You have high frequency letter sound correspondences. So you might have some common sound patterns that help students as they see those sounds come together, they're able to understand how to say them. So vowel consonant is one. So an example is it. There's a vowel and a consonant. And then vowel consonant consonant, an example is all. And then vowel vowel consonant consonant, an example is disc. All right, so I've covered a lot of information. So I'm going to take a moment and I want you all to jot down what you think the answers are here. All right, and then we're going to do a little bit of a different thing. There's a bullet point called you try. So we're going to do it a little bit differently after we get done with the foundational material. Kashia, are you here for reading or early childhood?
Early childhood.
All right, click that breakout room for me. There's a button in the bottom right-hand corner. It should be on your screen. You're going to click that breakout room and join that room. All right, so let's all come back together and let's talk a little bit about some of these definitions. What is a phoneme?
It's a small unit of sound.
All right, thank you. Then we have what substitution. What is it? What's an example of substitution? And you can even give your own example.
A substitution is like when you have the word mat and substitute the M for a B for bat.
Okay, wonderful. All right, and Maritza, I'm gonna call on you for this next one, segmentation, because I see you've been trying to jump in there. What is segmentation?
Separating like the sounds in a word. For example, if we have the word pet, it would be p, pet, and then separate each letter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then deletion.
Removing the M from mat and creating at.
Okay, wonderful. So we have some high frequency sound letter correspondences. I went over some of them. What are some examples?
And
All right, and what pattern is that?
I don't know.
That's all right. That's why we are reviewing. So that would be a vowel, consonant, consonant.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's do another one. What's another? You all probably saw me click back. What's another high frequency letter sound correspondence?
I have a question. So can you do a consonant vowel like B? Or does it have to be vowel consonant?
Well, these are just high. So these are just common patterns. So what you just talked about, B, is a common pattern. These are not all of the common patterns, but these are some of the common patterns. But you're thinking along the right lines. So when you see a word, you've just internalized it now because you're a reader, a fluent reader. But when children are learning, then this type of pattern helps them to unlock words that they might not have seen before because they know how other words sound when they follow these patterns.
Okay.
Great question. So since I see that we are a little bit on this part with the common vowel sound, well, the sound patterns, can anyone give me another example of a vowel consonant example? So I gave one, it. What's another one that's common?
On.
Perfect. Yes. So those are the ones where when they see it, they can sound it out because they've done it before, right? And then what about one that this one's a little harder to me? Vowel, vowel, consonant, consonant. What's a good example of that?
Feel.
Okay, great. Yes. Vowel, vowel, consonant, consonant. Yes. So you all have kind of the idea there. All right. So now this was, and I forgot to give you all a little background. I am actually a former high school English teacher. I also taught middle school for a year, and I've loved Greek and Latin roots. So that is also a part of what you will be tested on when you take the Praxis test. So let's talk a little bit about it. Roots are Latin or Greek bases of words. For example, cent is one. Cent actually means 100. And they are bases of many words. So you have affixes that are added to words to change their meanings. For example, you have pre. Pre can be added to the beginning of a word and change the meaning of the word. So let's take view, for example. If I say preview, then that means something different than review, right? So that's the function of those root words. And when students learn these and when you teach them these, then it helps them to unlock words that they may not otherwise know the definition of when they see them. They also help with reading fluency. So there's some different words that you want to think about with reading fluency. So fluency is the ability to read automatically. So the way that I like to think about it and the way I used to explain it in my classroom is it's like water. When you read, it should flow like water. You hear it. So rate refers to speed and fluidity. So that's pacing, where a child is able to pace out what they're saying, and that it comes out fluidly. Have you all, and I know some of you all are in the classroom, have you all had a student that's reading and they might be a good reader, but they're a speed reader and they just want to get all of the words out and they're not paying attention to the commas and the periods, they're just reading all of the words, right? That is a sign that even though they know how to read the words, they might not necessarily be comprehending. So a part of fluency is also partially comprehension. Rebecca, I saw you unmute. Did you have a question?
No, ma'am, I muted for just a second.
Oh, okay. All right. So then we have accuracy. And accuracy is where students are recognizing and decoding words correctly, particularly words that they might not know. So they might have some previous exposure to some words that help them to parse out others, but they are able to read not just by solely memorizing. And then you have prosody, and that's the range of vocal expressions. So I want someone to read this aloud, this sentence right here aloud for me.
Okay, I guess I'll read it.
Okay.
So, I declare, the angry woman screamed, running out of the burning house.
Perfect. So that I declare, that inflection in your voice, that's what we're referring to with prosody. A student who is an emerging reader might just read this, I declare the angry woman screamed running out of the burning house. They might just read it. But prosody refers to being able to recognize the emotion and the vocal inflections that are expected based on what the writer wrote. A test tip is to learn root affixes and suffixes by practicing on vocabulary.com. So is anybody familiar with vocabulary.com? No, well, wonderful. This is something that you can put in your teacher toolbox and definitely use it for many different levels of learners. Even first graders can use vocabulary.com, and they have lists where you can just practice them on your phone or on the computer. Ms. Jones, are you here for reading or early childhood? Ms. Jones, are you here for reading or early childhood? All right, so Ms. Jones, I'm gonna drop a message in the chat to you and I'm gonna keep on moving forward. Oh, okay, there we go. All right, Ms. Jones, so please click breakout rooms in the bottom right-hand corner. Go ahead and click that for me and you can join that room. That's where early childhood is. All right. So you all, another thing that you will see on the test relates to the stages of second language acquisition. So this is where we're referring to students who are maybe second language learners and they're learning English. They're going through that process. So a test tip, and I'm going to start with the test tip because the stages are called so many different things. You probably went over this in your class, and yet it might be totally new to you in some cases. So the tip is that the silent period is typically called pre-production. So make note cards to commit the stages to memory. That's the most important thing. So even if you see a different word on the test, you want to make sure that you understand kind of what the stages are in general. This one that I'm going over just has these 5 stages. I have seen some stages that have up to 12. These are the general ones. So the first one is the silent period. So you have a student who might be in your classroom and they're listening and they're trying to just kind of get an understanding of the information. They will have about 500 English words. And this usually is a period that lasts from when they first arrive to 6 months. Then we have early production. Students will speak in 1 or 2 word responses. So that's where you're saying hello, yes. They might have some short phrases and they have 1,000 words at least. And then remember that this is pretty fluid. So a student might show signs of being between the silent period and early production. Then we have speech emergence. So students are really learning how to speak a little bit more and they're doing more so sentences. So you see in the example, it says, can I go to the nurse? So that's a full sentence. And that usually lasts about a year. And then you have intermediate fluency. And that's where a student is able to engage in conversations, but they might have some grammar errors. They might still be learning how to use idioms and idiomatic expressions or expressions that are only used by speakers of English. So an example is, why did you divide by X there? So putting that there at the end is not something that a native English speaker might do. They usually will have 6,000 words by then. And then we have advanced fluency. This is where students are comfortable. They might just be as comfortable in their native language as they are in their second language. So some students show signs of both intermediate and advanced fluency, but these are kind of the stages. All right, are there any questions? There's a lot of information here. So are there any questions before we move on? Does anyone remember seeing this when they took the test, if they've taken the test?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Sarah. So I was given that as a pre-warning. I want you all to go ahead and just pull out of your brain what you learned from these last couple slides. So I'm going to put 1 minute on the timer. All right. So tell me, what are roots?
They're Latin or Greek bases of words.
Yes. All right. So what are some examples? And I gave 1 or 2, but what are some other examples?
So you said pre or re.
Those are, that's good for the examples. Those are affixes.
Oh, roots. Oh, root words.
So for instance, and this is something we can dig into a little bit more because I love these. So scent is something that I gave. That was a word. So roots they stood alone. Greek and Latin root words have become a part of our language, many languages actually. So when we say scent meant 100. So let's think about some words that also have something to do with 100. I'll give you all an example. Percent. Percent is going to be what part of 100 is this number? So is it 1%? 1% means 1 out of 100. Okay. What's another example using cent?
Bicentennial.
Perfect. That's a good one. And that bicentennial is a good one because it actually has a couple of roots and affixes in there. But cent is in there. Great. All right. And century, that's another one that you 100 years, century. So that's why, so there are many of them. And when students learn those, then it helps them to unlock words. What about affixes? What are affixes?
It changes the meaning of the word.
Mm-hmm. Affixes change the meaning of the word. Very good. All right. How would roots and affixes help students to understand a word? And we just talked about this a little bit. How would roots and affixes help students to understand a word?
Well, there's different affixes, so they can kind of put that on the root words. And it's just kind of like, I guess, recognizing the different words, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. And tell me, are you all kind of understanding this? Is this comfortable for you, or do we need to hang out here a little bit longer?
It's making sense. I'm just driving. That's why it's hard to come off mute.
I understand. That's good. That's a good sign. All right. And then what are the stages of language acquisition? So I hope you've been taking good notes because these are ones you want to commit to memory. And remember, while the stages might change on the test, so it might be 5 stages, 8 stages, the general idea of what students go through is the same. For instance, let's say we have a student who is saying a few words and kind of using that as their sentence.
So I know there's the silent stage,
Mm-hmm.
the emergent stage.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's one in between there, and then intermediate and advanced.
Good, wonderful. All right, so we're gonna just go back for just a second. And this is something that I don't expect you all to learn like right here at this moment, but I want you all to make sure you understand, even if you don't know the names of them, what happens at each of those stages. So silent period, they're gonna kind of primarily listen. The early production, they might speak in words or phrases. And then when the students are really catching on, this is where they're emerging in their speech, but they're not quite at the intermediate fluency stage. Intermediate and advanced is kind of where they will be as most fluent. Advanced, fluid. Advanced is going to be where really it's as if that was their first language. So you might hear an accent, but in terms of understanding, that's the thing that you want to think about. And then intermediate. Yes.
Okay, so the silent period, it makes it sound like you said, like they're observing, they're like a little sponge, they're trying to take everything in. And then I do remember you saying that that's where they have about 500 words in their vocabulary, or no? Is that what if they use it, would they still be classified as being in the silent period? Or would that be more as an early production?
I can tell you that on the test, when they ask this question, you're going to know which stage they would be in, because they're not going to make it where a person has, 700 words or something. They're not going to make it hard, right? They're going to make it where you know that they're either in the very early stages or they're more in the intermediate stages. Now, I'll also say that when we're talking about language acquisition, they will also have some examples where they'll say a student is in this stage. How could you help them? How could you help them build their vocabulary? So really, understanding the stages is more so to aid you in being able to answer questions about how you would serve a student and scenario-based questions.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're so welcome. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to do a little time check. Okay, we're making good time. So we're going to talk a little bit about literature and informational texts. And we're going to talk about some of my favorite inferences. So there are many comprehension strategies when you're teaching students how to read and understand. So inferences is one. So inference is what we do all the time as human beings, and we also do it in our reading. So you're determining a suggestion by clues in the text. So it's not something that is explicit, but it is something that can be inferred based on a variety of things. Then summarization is a big one. Determining the main ideal, getting the general message, getting the gist of a text. So if the overall story cannot be matched to the general message, then it is not the best answer choice. And this is something that I teach all of the time with students. If you look at a question, they're going to have 4 answer choices, and probably 2 of them are really close, but there might be a few words that change the meaning and do not represent the main idea of the text. Those are the situations where you're able to very quickly move through and figure out what's going to be the right answer. So I'm going to give you all an inference example. The thunder boomed. My dog hid under the bed and was shaking like a leaf. What is the inference that you can make here? What can you infer? What is suggested by this that's going on?
I can infer that the dog is afraid of storms.
Very good. What made you say that?
The thunder booming and the dog hiding under the bed and shaking.
Also, what made
So my
you
experience,
infer
I guess.
from it? It's a little bit of experience, yes, but also you're using evidence from the text. Also, what made you say that there was a storm?
Because we know that when there's a storm, there's possible thunder.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So these things come naturally to us, and we have to uncover that for our students. So this is an example. I know the thunder is loud. Loud noises can be scary. The text says that the dog was shaking. I can infer that the dog is scared. So that's how the inferences work. We also have story elements. So you can help a student to understand stories and patterns in stories by having them to identify story elements. So we have character analysis as well. So that would be actions, traits, relationships, and personalities that help them to understand what's happening in a text. Setting is where things take place. There's a lot that can be inferred if something happens on a beautiful beach versus on a desert island. We have characters, people or animals in the story. Then we have themes. So that is the general universal message of a story. Conflict, what's happening in the story that needs to be solved or resolved? What action is taking place? Key events, so students should be able to say, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and then it led to, which is the next part, the resolution, how the problem is solved or how the story wraps up. So these are different elements that we have become accustomed to as fluent readers, but we have to teach to our students. All right. So I'm going to take a pause because this next one is, it's a lot of information on this one. Do you all have any questions about story elements, character analysis, or comprehension strategies? No questions? All right, awesome. So this next piece is about recognizing genre. So this is another way to students can uncover information. And this is typically for our older children, so maybe 3rd through 5th, but this does come up. So we have poetry, drama, picture books, novels, folk tales, myths, tall tales, historical fiction, science fiction. There's so many different genres. And based on a genre, a student can learn a lot about what a text is about. Something that you also want to review is our poetry elements. Poetry elements also assist with comprehension. The way that something is laid out can help a student to read more fluently and to also understand what the text is trying to say. So rhyme scheme is an example. So patterns of rhymes at the end of poems helps a student to read that with the beat or the rhythm that was anticipated by the author. And then meter is the basic structure of lines and verses. So I think about Shakespearean poetry. Do y'all remember that from high school? Did you all read that in college as well?
I didn't.
You didn't? Okay. So Shakespeare has a lot of specific meters in his rhymes. Then we have play elements. So when a student reads a play, plays are special in that they have stage directions. So they are telling actors where to go, who walks off stage, who walks on stage. And it helps with how a student should imagine the play in their heads that they're just reading it. Point of view is also important because a student has to understand what point of view the story is written from. So we have a first, second, third person objective, third person limited. So I won't go over first, second, but I will go over third person objective. So that is where as you're reading, it is a some voice that is telling a story. The narrator is telling a story, but they don't have any emotions tied to it. They don't have opinions tied to it. It is objective. Third person limited is where the narrator has a limited view. They might even be a character in the action. Then we have third person omniscient. So that is the all-knowing character. This point of view, this narrator is actually able to say what a person is thinking and what a person is feeling during the time. So those are the different points of view, and students really have to understand that as a part of comprehension. And then text complexity is very important. As future teachers, you all have to make sure that you're understanding the different levels. And there are different types of ways to measure that. So one is quantitative. So that is the readability, word frequency, and sentence strip. So that's measured by DRA and Lexile levels. You all are probably most familiar with Lexile levels. There was a program in Shelby County schools, well, Memphis City schools, when I used to go to Memphis City schools, and it was called Accelerated Readers. Are you all familiar with any programs like that? Not so much. Okay, that might be too far back. There's also a program called News ELA, and News ELA also uses Lexile levels to level what a student is reading and kind of understand it. Monster is a great example of this. In terms of readability and word frequency and sentence strip, this is a lower level text, but in terms of the issues that they tackle, like racism and social justice, the level is a little bit higher, especially in terms of understanding what they're really getting at, what they're talking about. So that's where we get to qualitative, where we're talking about structural elements, language clarity. Literal versus figurative is a big one. And then knowledge demands. What amount of prior knowledge does a student have to have going into a text to be able to unlock and understand it? So I'm going to take a pause here. I'm sorry, I muted for a second. I want you all to tell me what you learned from that section.
From what we just looked at,
Mhm.
I learned about, well, a review of the third person views. I never really thought about it as in like, all the all-knowing character and stuff like that. And then I can't remember the last thing you just talked about.
I'm going to reshare. Well, I'm going to thank you, Sarah. I'm going to give Rebecca, Lynn, and Maritza a chance to jump in as well. Did you all notice some additional things?
The only thing that I heard you describe that was different, I'm actually going over poetry with my ELA class right now.
Oh.
So it's definitely very different when you are trying to teach it to fourth graders, like the wording and examples that you use to break down poetry and like point of view. It's very different from what I have to present to younger kids.
Yes.
But it's good to know. So I'll definitely go back and take a look at that before I take my test.
Hey, wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and reshare. And I'm going to go over a couple other things, and then we're going to do a few questions, okay? So actually, I'm going to go to this one. Okay. So the second parts are language, writing, and communication. So I'm going to give you all a tip that might sound a little funny, but I love it. I used to, with my high schoolers, use Schoolhouse Rock. And they would do it on their own because they were too cool to listen to it during class. But for my students who really needed that additional support to listen to Schoolhouse Rock and understand the parts of speech and irregular verbs and to get that review or to learn it for the first time, it was very helpful. Vocabulary is another one that's a lot of fun. My sixth graders, when I taught sixth grade, really liked that. And it helps me. Sometimes I know that I still hum to myself conjunction junction when I'm trying to figure the conjunctions out and how they function. So parts of speech are the nouns, adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, pronouns, verbs, prepositions, and interjections. These are the main ones. And they are important for you to understand. I know that they are pretty basic level, but you want to make sure that you understand how they function, especially as you become teachers and you have to teach it. A strategy that I know that some teachers use that's really powerful is to have students to start each day breaking down a sentence, simple sentence, and showing what the functions of the sentence are. Then it helps them to still unlock how to read. All of this, even grammar, is a part of learning how to read, how to write, how to understand the language. There are also some irregular verbs, and you want to be pretty familiar with those verbs so that you can help your students to learn them as well. Punctuation is a big one, particularly on this test. So you want to be sure that you're familiar with the punctuations as well. You can use noredink.com or Khan Academy to study these skills. They're right there. They're simple, and those two systems will allow you to practice it at your own pace. All right. So we have about 10 minutes, and I'm going to be respectful of that time. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go into 240 tutoring. I'm going to stop share for a moment. I'm going to go into 240 tutoring, and we're going to practice a few questions. All right. So what I want you all to do, I'm going to give you all a minute, but you all can drop it in the chat. And once I get the answer from all three of you all, then we'll talk about it. Oh, Sarah, you had a question. What about for, oh, got it. That's an older one. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Which of the following contains R-controlled syllables? And I'm starting my timer now. All right, I like how you narrowed that down. 30 seconds. All right. So I have A or D, C, and A. So Sarah, I'm going to start with you. Oh, you said A. Okay. So Sarah, tell me what you why you chose A.
Because I know R controlled is it's mainly like the the sound R.
Mhm.
That one just sound right.
Okay. So R comes at the end there. All right. So Leanne, why'd you choose rude?
Well, the others like great, that's more of the GR sound, and retreat is more of the RE sound. So it's in between donor and rude just seemed more R controlled to me.
Mhm. All right, so let's submit. All right. Donor contains the R-controlled syllable because R ends the second syllable. And let's see why C is not it. Rude does not contain an R-controlled syllable. The syllable begins with the R instead of ending with it. So when we've come upon a question like this, what we want to do is we want to write down, let me review R-controlled syllables. That's what you should have in your notes, review R-controlled syllables. And you want to practice more questions like this. All right, let's do another one. That was good. In the word trail is the onset and L is the sorry, y'all. Maritza, tell me why you chose B, rhyme. Maritza,
Sorry, I started talking without unmuting. I thought about like the onset and rhyme. And well, if it's already giving us like TR is the onset, then the rest of the word is the rhyme.
Okay. All right, the initial sound in the word is the onset and the remaining sound is the rhyme. So let's say that you chose something else. Actually, you all chose B. Let's say that you chose something else though, then you would write down the definition of what an onset is, what a rhyme is, and you would remind yourself to go back and practice more like this. All right, so we're getting the hang of it. All right, so this is one that I'm going to give you all the full minute if you need it. All right. So I see, Lynn, I see B and D. So which one are you gonna go with and why?
Oh, I don't know where the B came from. I'm sorry. I think that's for my last question.
Oh, okay, got you. All right, so D, why D?
I can barely see the screen. Hang on, hang on.
Oh, let me see if I can make it bigger for you. Is that better?
Oh, yes, much better.
Okay.
Well, it will make more of an impact for them if it's more meaningful instruction and they can relate to it more.
Okay, awesome. That is correct. This is the reason why. And some of these questions, as you're learning them, we might have not have talked about them, but talking about the subject is important. And this is one of those questions that I was talking about, this next one. Okay, we have consensus. Yes, so the key is that the beginning levels, this is where he is. This is what you need to do to support him. That's exactly the type of question that I was talking about. I'm gonna return to the course, and I really want us to do one more type. We'll do the, actually, I wanna do the text analysis because there we go. All right. All right. Let's see. Very good. This is a prefix, which is an affix before a word. And remember that these affixes and suffixes are not actual words. All right. All right. So do y'all want to do one more? Or are you ready to wrap up?
We can do one more.
Awesome. All right. So let's do this one. All right. So it looks like you all picked D. All right. So let's see what we have. Okay. All right. So let's see. Y'all are really good together. So students are encouraged to say the word quickly upon seeing it. This encourages the students to have automatic recognition. That's perfect. All right. So I'm going to stop share. I hope that this has been helpful to you all. This is just a small part of many of the things that are covered on the test. Typically, we have sessions that are an hour and a half long. So just keep that in mind that there's so much more that we can cover, but hopefully you learned something new today. I'm going to
I have a
stop
quick
the video.
question.